Imagine being born into the most powerful family in America, where every step is followed by the press and every smile is treated as a symbol of perfection. But for Rosemary Kennedy, reality was a nightmare, one in which she was imprisoned by the very expectations of her own family. This is the true story of the forgotten daughter of the Kennedy dynasty, a young woman who once met a king dressed in silk and elegance, only to be pushed by her own father a few years later into a brutal brain surgery intended to erase all of her imperfections. In 1941, when the lobotomy permanently stripped away her personality, an entire empire joined together to conceal the crime behind a web of lies. It is a story of abandonment that lasted for 20 years, desperate letters from a convent, a mother's complicit silence, and medical records buried in the shadows. How could a father sacrifice his own child in exchange for political glory? And what became of that vibrant soul after the curtain of deception was finally pulled away? On a hurried autumn day in 1918, as the Spanish flu pandemic was sweeping relentlessly across America, a decision lasting just 2 hours in a delivery room permanently altered the course of one person's life. It was September 13, a time when hospitals were overwhelmed by chaos and suffering from severe staff shortages. At the family home at 83 Beale Street in Brookline, Massachusetts, Rose Kennedy went into labor with her third child, but the attending physician was unable to arrive in time. In a state of extreme panic and determined to follow medical procedures in a rigid and mechanical manner, the nurse forced Rose to keep her legs tightly closed and even physically pushed the baby's emerging head back into the birth canal. During those suffocating and misguided 2 hours, the brain of the infant Rosemary Kennedy, commonly known as Rosemary, was deprived of a critically important supply of oxygen. When the doctor finally arrived, Rosemary entered the world crying and was declared a completely healthy child. But a cruel reality awaited America's most powerful family. As Rosemary grew older, the normal developmental milestones of childhood began to be missed in increasingly obvious ways. She was slow to crawl, her first steps were extremely unsteady, and her language skills developed much later than those of her two older brothers, Joe Jr. and John. By the age of 2, Rosemary was still struggling painfully with simple tasks such as sitting up on her own and learning to crawl. Rose, a mother whose attention to detail bordered on obsession, carefully recorded her children's health conditions on index cards and began to notice that the younger siblings born after Rosemary were rapidly surpassing her in every aspect. Medical specialists and distinguished psychologists brought in from Harvard and Washington, after conducting numerous examinations, concluded that her condition was the result of oxygen deprivation during birth, leading her to be classified as intellectually disabled, according to the medical terminology of the time. However, in the social climate of the 1920s, people with disabilities were viewed with extreme prejudice, and having a child with an intellectual disability was considered a major stain on the reputation of elite families. As a result, in order to protect the family's image, the Kennedys chose to completely conceal the truth. Rose never confided in her friends and consistently presented her daughter as a child developing entirely normally. Growing up in the Kennedy family was nothing like growing up in an ordinary household. In reality, it was a harsh training ground designed exclusively for winners. Joseph P. Kennedy was driven by a burning ambition to build an extraordinary political dynasty, one in which every child served as an instrument of that ambition. They were expected to win every competition. The sons were expected to lead the nation, while the daughters were expected to become symbols of perfection. The family dinner table was always filled with rapid-fire discussions about history and world affairs, and Rosemary often sat in silence, completely unable to keep up with the conversations of her siblings. In intelligence testing, she received very low evaluations. When she attended kindergarten at the Edward Devotion School in Brookline, her teacher bluntly refused to promote her to first grade because she had fallen so far behind her classmates. After the family moved to Riverdale, she continued to struggle significantly with recognizing letters, spelling, and mathematics. She was also noticeably awkward in physical activities, clumsy while dancing, and unable even to cut the meat on her own plate. Instead of lowering their expectations and accepting their daughter's differences, Joseph and Rose Kennedy chose to conceal them by constantly changing her educational environment in an effort to erase every sign of weakness. Rosemary was withdrawn from public school and taught at home by private tutors. When she was 15 years old, the family sent her to the Sacred Heart Convent in Rhode Island, a secluded boarding school hidden from the curiosity of high society. There, she was completely separated from the other students. 2 nuns and a special teacher were assigned to teach her throughout the day in a private classroom. In exchange for this special arrangement, the Kennedy family generously donated a new tennis court to the school as an elegant form of compensation. Despite all the intervention and money invested in her education, Rosemary's reading, writing, spelling, and arithmetic skills permanently remained at approximately a 4th grade level. Although her intellectual abilities remained comparable to those of a 10-year-old child, Rosemary possessed striking beauty and a radiant smile that reflected the distinctive charm of the Kennedy family. Despite her difficulties, she worked hard to follow the rules, recording in her diary details about tea parties, trips to the opera, dress fittings, and even visits to the White House. To preserve the image of a flawless family, all of her social activities were strictly controlled. Her brothers, John and Joe Jr., were assigned to court Rosemary to dances, ensuring that she always had a dance partner and appeared no different from anyone else in the eyes of those around her. To the media, Mr. and Mrs. Kennedy repeatedly lied in order to protect the reputation of their rising family dynasty. They told Woman's Day magazine that she was studying to become a kindergarten teacher, and they told Parents magazine that she was passionate about social work and secretly dreamed of performing on stage. The deception reached its peak when the Boston Globe requested an interview. One of Joseph Kennedy's assistants drafted an entire statement in advance and made Rosemary painstakingly copy it by hand, in which she claimed that she had earned a teaching certificate in the Montessori method of education. Rosemary's greatest opportunity to shine on the international stage arrived unexpectedly in 1938, when Joseph Kennedy was appointed United States Ambassador to the United Kingdom. The family moved to London and immediately became the focus of attention for both the media and European high society. In May 1938, Rosemary and her younger sister Kathleen were officially presented to King George VI and Queen Elizabeth at Buckingham Palace. To prepare for this important occasion, Rosemary wore a sparkling white tulle gown embroidered with silver, carried a bouquet of lily-of-the-valley flowers, and spent many days practicing the highly complex royal curtsy for hours at a time. As she stepped forward to perform the ceremony, she stumbled and nearly fell in front of the king. However, the king and queen maintained their polite smiles as though nothing had happened. Rose Kennedy immediately dismissed the incident entirely, viewing the presentation as a brilliant and flawless success. The British press was completely captivated, praising Rosemary as an exceptionally beautiful and elegant young woman. Some reports even suggested that her beauty overshadowed that of her younger sister Kathleen. These were the hidden realities of the secret world of old wealthy elites, where a radiant smile was often the result of a flawlessly orchestrated performance. Amid the chaos of diplomatic obligations and lavish social gatherings, Rosemary unexpectedly found a rare haven of peace in her life at the Assumption Convent at Belmont House in Kent. This was a school that specialized in the Montessori method of education. The environment emphasized development at an individual pace, learning through the senses and freedom from rigid pressure, making it perfectly suited to someone who moved through life at her own rhythm, like Rosemary. Far removed from the suffocating competition and constant scrutiny she had experienced in America, life here unfolded slowly, steadily, and with an extraordinary level of support. She was entrusted with specific and meaningful responsibilities, supervising younger students in the garden, reading books to them at scheduled times, preparing and serving lunch, and personally putting away china dishes and silverware neatly into cabinets. Her teachers noted remarkable progress, improved behavior, and her growing ability to seek out instructors whenever she felt confused or overwhelmed. For the first time in her life, Rosemary truly felt useful, confident, and able to exist within a structure that belonged to her. She frequently wrote affectionate letters home, expressing her pride whenever her father came to visit, and believing that she had been chosen to remain in England for a special reason. Her time at Belmont House was far more than a simple educational program. They were the brightest, most peaceful, and happiest months in the entire life of the daughter who carried the Kennedy name. But then, on a hurried autumn day in 1940, as World War II began to spread across Europe, a ship crossing the Atlantic unknowingly carried a death sentence for Rosemary Kennedy's freedom. Joseph Kennedy's decision to resign as the United States Ambassador to the United Kingdom and bring his entire family back to America to avoid the war stripped his daughter of the last stable environment she had ever known. England was not only the place where she had been presented to royalty in elegant silk gowns. More importantly, Belmont House in Kent, with its gentle Montessori approach to education, was the only place where she truly felt that she belonged. There, the slower pace and absence of pressure had allowed her to gain confidence while supervising young children, clearing dishes, and writing clear letters home. But when the ship arrived in America, Rosemary was immediately thrown back into the noisy, chaotic, and fiercely competitive world of the Kennedy family in New York. The contrast was too sudden, too shocking. All around her were siblings constantly debating politics and competing relentlessly in sports under suffocating pressure, while she was left behind in a state of profound helplessness. Records indicate that once she lost the familiar routine and protective affection she had known, Rosemary's behavior began to deteriorate significantly. Her seizures became more frequent, accompanied by uncontrollable outbursts of rage that seemed like desperate acts of resistance against her reality. A close family friend later described seeing her pacing up and down hallways like an animal backed into a corner, screaming, cursing, and attacking anyone who tried to stop her. The peak of her loss of control came when she suddenly attacked her 78-year-old grandfather on the front porch, kicking and striking him until others forcibly pulled her away. To deal with the problem, the family returned to the same solution they had used before. They removed her from the home and kept her out of the public eye and away from media attention. They sent her to a summer camp in Massachusetts. However, because the staff had never been informed by the family about her actual condition, everything quickly turned into a disaster. At night, Rosemary was discovered wandering aimlessly around the dark campgrounds. She wore shoes that were far too tight, causing her feet to blister and bleed, yet she continued walking in a state of vacant panic. After only a few weeks, the camp administrators reached the limit of their patience and asked the family to take her home. Instead of coming herself to comfort her daughter, Rose Kennedy, who was vacationing at a spa in Maine at the time, coldly sent an assistant to collect her as though she were a defective item. Her next destination was St. Gertrude's, a convent school in Washington, D.C., for individuals with disabilities. But by then, Rosemary was a 22-year-old woman who had already experienced freedom and the glamour of elegant social events. She refused to accept being confined by the harsh and rigid rules of the nuns. Late at night, she began secretly slipping out of the convent. She was frequently found wandering the streets at 2 o'clock in the morning, her clothing disheveled and her explanations completely incoherent. The nuns reported a harsh reality back to the Kennedy family. They suspected that Rosemary had been sneaking out to bars and meeting men. Their greatest fear was that she might contract a sexually transmitted disease or become pregnant unexpectedly, a scenario that would shatter the carefully constructed image of perfection surrounding the Kennedy family. But in the eyes of the most powerful man in the family, the decline of a young woman was not a cry for help from an exhausted soul. It was a threat to his family's entire political empire. At that time, Joseph Kennedy was pouring all of his resources, wealth, and connections into building a path to Congress and ultimately the presidency for his sons. A sexual scandal, an illegitimate child, or having a daughter labeled as mentally ill would become a threat to every ambition of the Kennedy dynasty. By then, medical science already offered sedative medications that could help patients sleep and reduce agitation. But Joseph sought a more permanent and radical solution to erase what he viewed as a blemish. That was the price of power, a cruel bargain in which he was willing to subject his own daughter to unbearable suffering simply to preserve the family's polished public image. All of those cold political calculations were placed above even the life of his own flesh and blood. At that very moment, the media began reporting on a new brain surgery procedure known as the prefrontal lobotomy. The method was being heavily promoted by doctors Walter Freeman and James Watts at George Washington University Hospital. Dr. Freeman, a neurologist rather than a surgeon, traveled across the country in a truck, promoting the claim that cutting the nerve connections in the frontal lobe could calm agitated patients and transform them into compliant, obedient individuals. In particular, this procedure was frequently directed at women who were considered emotionally unstable, rebellious, or excessively sexual. In reality, the procedure was extremely dangerous. Dr. Freeman himself once admitted at a medical conference that a patient's personality would be completely erased after the operation. The American Medical Association had not recognized the procedure as safe. Even Rosemary's sister Kathleen, after secretly researching it, returned home and directly warned her mother that this was not a treatment they should allow for Rosemary. Despite all of those warnings, Joseph Kennedy viewed it as the perfect tool for maintaining control. He did not consult his wife, he did not say a word to his children, and he certainly did not ask Rosemary for her opinion. He quietly made the decision to permanently eliminate what he regarded as the problem represented by his daughter. On a cold morning shortly after Thanksgiving in November 1941, a surgical procedure lasting less than 20 minutes permanently took away the soul of a human being. Rosemary, then 23 years old, obediently entered George Washington University Hospital with her father. She had absolutely no idea what was about to happen. She simply trusted completely that her father was doing what was best for her, just as he had taken her to countless doctors throughout her childhood. Inside the stark white operating room, everything unfolded according to a process that modern medicine now regards as horrifying. Rosemary was not placed under general anesthesia. She was given only a mild sedative and a local anesthetic injected into her scalp. She was then strapped tightly to the operating table to prevent her from reacting to the sound of the suction equipment and the clattering of surgical instruments. The doctors cut away part of her dark hair. Then they used a drill to make 2 small holes on either side of her temples, penetrating directly through her skull. From those 2 drilled openings, Dr. James Watts began inserting a long metal instrument, moving it back and forth to sever the neural connections in the frontal lobe, the region responsible for human emotion and judgment. As the instrument continued to destroy portions of her brain, Dr. Walter Freeman stood beside her and repeatedly instructed Rosemary to perform mental tasks. He asked her to sing "God Bless America," count backward, and recite the Lord's Prayer. They used her voice and awareness as their measure. As long as she could still speak, the instrument would continue cutting deeper. She kept singing. The blade kept cutting. Then, with the final pass of the instrument, Rosemary's voice began to slow. Her clear words gradually broke apart into meaningless, disjointed fragments and incoherent sounds. And finally, she fell completely silent. The operating room sank into a deadly stillness. The procedure was over, but its horror was so overwhelming that a nurse who witnessed it that day immediately resigned and permanently left the medical profession because she could not bear the brutality disguised as science. The catastrophic consequences of the surgery became apparent almost immediately after Rosemary left the operating table. Once a beautiful young woman who could write in her diary, attend dances, and prepare meals on her own, Rosemary's intellectual abilities plummeted to the level of a 2-year-old child. She completely lost control of her bladder and bowels and required full-time care. Her body collapsed. One arm was permanently paralyzed and she could no longer walk on her own. Her language abilities disappeared. She could only produce babbling sounds that no one could understand. A life once filled with vitality, a young woman longing for love and acceptance, had been erased in just 20 minutes. Joseph Kennedy immediately realized that he had made an irreversible mistake. But instead of facing the consequences, he chose one final cold and calculated act. He removed Rosemary from the hospital and hid her away forever. This decision was not discussed with anyone. In fact, Joseph did not even tell his wife until everything had already been done. Rosemary's first destination was Craig House, a private psychiatric hospital hidden behind rows of tall trees about 90 minutes from New York City, where she remained for 7 long years. In 1949, Joseph transferred her to St. Coletta in Jefferson, Wisconsin, a residential institution for people with disabilities located far from the reach of the media. There, he spent money to build a small private house completely separated from the main facility, a residence that the nuns often referred to as the Kennedy House. She was placed under the full-time care of 2 Catholic nuns, Sister Margaret Ann and Sister Leona. He provided her with a car so the nuns could take her for drives, a small dog to keep her company, and hired a woman to teach her pottery 3 evenings each week. But in exchange for that material support came one of the cruelest forms of abandonment a family could inflict. From the moment Rosemary was placed in that institution, her own father never visited her again. Her mother, Rose Kennedy, also did not come to see her daughter for 20 years. To conceal the truth and protect the political futures of their rising sons, the Kennedy family carefully constructed a series of lies. They told the media and the public that Rosemary was teaching children with disabilities in another Midwestern state. At other times, they claimed that she was simply a private person who preferred to live away from public attention. The truth was buried so completely that even Rosemary's own siblings, including her brothers John F. Kennedy and Robert F. Kennedy, did not know where she actually was or what had happened to her. Rosemary gradually disappeared from family photographs, Christmas celebrations, and every major political campaign. She became an invisible shadow within the most powerful family dynasty in America. It would take another 20 years, and only after a different tragedy struck the family, for this horrifying truth to begin emerging. In December 1961, during the very first year that her brother John F. Kennedy entered the White House as President of the United States, Joseph Kennedy suddenly suffered a severe stroke. The stroke permanently robbed him of his ability to speak and walk independently, reducing the man who had once wielded enormous influence over America to a state of vulnerability and complete dependence on others. A disability strikingly similar to what Rosemary had endured for the previous 2 decades. Once the barrier created by the father's control collapsed, the truth about Rosemary was finally spoken aloud. At that point, the Kennedy siblings were stunned to learn that their sister was still alive and living in isolation in Wisconsin. President John F. Kennedy secretly visited her during a campaign trip through the American Midwest, and that first reunion after 20 years of separation left a profound impact. In 1962, her sister Eunice Kennedy decided to break the family's silence by writing a lengthy article for the Saturday Evening Post. In the article, Eunice publicly acknowledged that Rosemary had an intellectual disability. However, the truth was still only partially revealed. To protect the family's reputation, she concealed the fact that Rosemary had undergone a brutal lobotomy arranged by their father. It was not until 1987, when historian Doris Kearns Goodwin published The Fitzgeralds and the Kennedys, that the full truth finally became public. The book revealed that Joseph Kennedy had personally authorized the brain surgery on his daughter, causing permanent damage and then concealing it for decades. The revelation shocked the American public. In the end, that dark secret could not remain buried forever. But Rosemary's story did not end entirely in the darkness of an institution, because the very life that was taken from her became a source of inspiration for changing the world. The image of an older sister who had suffered so much hardship pushed the Kennedy siblings to take meaningful action in an effort to atone for their family's mistakes through quiet but determined efforts against social prejudice. Her younger sister, Eunice Kennedy, who always carried Rosemary in her heart, began organizing a summer camp for children and adults with disabilities in the backyard of her home in Maryland. That small summer camp quickly grew into the Special Olympics, founded in 1968, which became a global sports movement connecting more than 1.4 million athletes with intellectual disabilities from 150 countries, providing them with inclusion, joy, and respect. As President, John F. Kennedy changed national healthcare policies. He established the President's Panel on Mental Retardation and signed numerous federal laws that provided substantial funding for research centers and programs supporting people with disabilities. Her brother, Senator Ted Kennedy, also devoted decades of his career to becoming one of the strongest advocates for disability rights in the United States Congress. Her nephew, Anthony Shriver, founded Best Buddies International to connect people with disabilities with community volunteers, breaking the isolation that Rosemary herself had endured. All of these remarkable legacies, although carrying the Kennedy name, ultimately grew from the heartbreaking truth of Rosemary's life. And in the final years of her life, after so many storms and so much abandonment, Rosemary finally found the warmth of family once again. After Joseph Kennedy died in 1969, the strict control he had exercised came to an end, and Rosemary gradually began spending more time in the outside world. Although she carried the severe disabilities caused by the brain surgery, lived with one permanently paralyzed arm, and had forever lost the ability to speak clearly, she continued to work hard in rehabilitation. Over time, she regained the ability to walk, though with a noticeable limp. Records indicate that when Rose Kennedy visited her for the first time after 20 years of separation, Rosemary recoiled with an expression filled with pain and anger. She clearly recognized the mother who had abandoned her for so many years. It was the unbearable pain of a forgotten child. But gradually, through the patience of her family, she allowed them to rebuild their relationship with her. Her siblings regularly took her on visits to the family home in Cape Cod, Massachusetts, as well as on trips to Florida and Washington, D.C., allowing her to enjoy moments of reunion and togetherness. At the small house on the grounds of St. Coletta, under the devoted care of Sister Paulus Kohler for 35 years, Rosemary lived a quiet and peaceful life. She often made small pottery pieces, walked with her dog, swam with assistants, and frequently smiled brightly while looking at photographs of her family and nieces and nephews. On January 7, 2005, Rosemary Kennedy passed away from natural causes at the age of 86 at Fort Atkinson Hospital in Wisconsin. In the final moments that brought to a close a life filled with hardship and change, she did not face a lonely ending as many might have imagined. Her siblings, including Eunice, Patricia, Jean, and Ted, were all at her bedside. She was returned to her hometown and laid to rest beside her parents at Holyhood Cemetery in Brookline, Massachusetts. The life of Rosemary Kennedy was not a political triumph or a historic speech. She should have been a proud heiress to one of America's most powerful families, but fate forced her to bear the cruelest price of power. Yet it was her quiet existence that ultimately changed public attitudes and opened doors of hope, dignity, and equality for millions of vulnerable people around the world for generations to come. For 20 long years, America and the world were deceived by the words of a powerful family dynasty, led to believe that Rosemary Kennedy was busy teaching children in some distant place. They coldly erased her existence from every Christmas photograph and every highly publicized political campaign, all to preserve the glittering image of a political dynasty standing at the height of its power while concealing the tragedy that lay beneath. This was the ruthless and unforgiving game of survival played within elite circles, where the secrets of the upper class were protected through absolute silence, and where the legacy of a family was valued above the lives of its own flesh and blood. The greatest cruelty did not lie in the doctor's brutal lobotomy. It lay in the abandonment by the very people who called themselves her family. Joseph P. Kennedy chose to alter his daughter's mind in order to protect his son's path to the White House. Rose Kennedy chose to look away for 20 years, continuing to wear expensive designer gowns and smile for the cameras. But can compromise with evil in exchange for political glory ever purchase lasting peace of mind? When a historical account finally exposed the full truth in 1987, the world was stunned. Neither the harsh judgment of time nor the immense privilege of a wealthy and powerful dynasty could redeem a soul corrupted by human choices. Joseph Kennedy may have spent his fortune building a secluded Kennedy house in Wisconsin to hide Rosemary from the world, but he ultimately lost to the judgment of history. The Camelot dynasty paid the price of power through a curse marked by premature deaths, shocking assassinations, and the tear-filled struggles of later generations, as though fate itself had struck the family with relentless cruelty. Was that surgery in 1941 merely a tool of control? Or was it the spark that ignited the chain of tragedies that would later consume the dynasty itself? If you, like me, refuse to accept polished versions of history and want to continue looking beyond the surface to uncover the truths hidden behind the glass walls of elite society, then subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications right now. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Together, we will continue uncovering the next hidden secrets lurking in the shadows behind some of the world's most powerful family dynasties.